not able to vote, then I'll ask for an oral vote.
And Chloe, we still have a member who's desperately trying to get into Zoom but cannot get into
No, Darren Miller, we are holding the vote, please, and we have made every opportunity possible for that named member to get in. Caer Bleidlais.
Close the vote.
O blaid, dau ddeg wyth.
In favour 28, no abstentions, 27 against, and therefore the regulations are approved.
Well, there you have it, folks. Scenes at the Senedd yesterday. Absolutely shambolic. What a farce. I was there with many people. Big Brother Watch and many other organisations was demonstrating against vaccine passports here in Wales. And what should have been a vote in the Senedd that should not have gone through to make this discriminatory law, which it is at its heart, it would not have gone through if the technical issue had been resolved. Well, joining me now is media commentator Jamie Jenkins to talk about this. Jamie, you saw what happened in the Senedd yesterday. What's your thoughts?
Well, Richard, it takes a lot to get me angry, and this one is definitely up there with the things that's made me angry. Now, this vaccine parcel thing, this is not about being anti-vaccine. People can go on my Twitter profile. I publish daily how many vaccines are being issued across the country. People's choice, you know, I've had the vaccine. I know many people haven't, many people have, right? This is not about being kind of anti-vaccine. I've built my career on looking at evidence and where evidence supports things. That, you know, the Welsh Government's own scientific advice said this could backfire. There was very little evidence for it. And it's very rare, Rich, where you get all the opposition parties coming together in the Senedd, because, you know, Mark Drager's kind of had a free pass for the Welsh Labour have for the last 20 odd years in getting legislation through. And they were all coming together for this, you know, crucial vote on vaccine passports. Plaid Cymru said they were going to go against it for different reasons. For the Lib Dems, who kind of didn't think they were kind of the liberal way of outgoing things. The Tory party have been opposing these, and Plaid Cymru, I think, didn't like the fact that there's this issue around the lateral flow test workaround. But they were all coming against to vote against it. And as your clip has shown, you know, you had a member of the Senedd from up in the north there, who's, I think, believe at the Tory party conference, who'd already stated his intention to vote against this motion. He couldn't get in there. You know, I don't know the full details of all of that, but the presiding officer knew that. And I understand, Rich, that if it was a tie, which it would have been had they got in, she would have to have voted against it. So this legislation and these vaccine passports would have been killed off last night. But because of this technical issue, they've not.
Yeah, it's a technical issue. And surely, you know, they broke before the vote actually happened. They had a break because under the Coronavirus Act and the hybrid vote, you know, they had these breaks. So surely during that break, they must have been whipping like mad going on, obviously. Surely, you know, whoever was in, you know, whether it was Darren Miller or I know Artie Davis has been poorly, so he wasn't there. And surely there should have been people that got a hold of him and said, look, you need to get on. You need to make sure you're logged in. Now, if he did, because I don't want to vilify the guy because we don't know the facts or the details yet. But nevertheless, what the presiding officer did yesterday, in my personal opinion, was completely undemocratic. It should never have happened. And I fear where democracy is going in Wales. And it's not just about the vote on vaccine passports. It's set in a precedent and a principle. As you mentioned, Jamie, if the vote had gone to a deadlock, the presiding officer, according, and I've been through the standing orders this morning, so folks don't know, this is not, I wouldn't recommend reading this, it's boring, right? But these are the standing orders for procedures in the Welsh Assembly, right? It's their kind of constitution, if you like. And in there, under section 620, it says that the presiding officer, if there's a deadlock, she gets the cast-in vote. Now, if there's no continuation of the conversation around that motion, in fact, in the sense that it's the final vote, there's no stage in it, she has to go with the negative on the motion. Basically, she has to vote against the motion. Okay, she has to. But of course, she excused herself from doing that by not including the member from Clwyd, Gareth Davis, MS. And so then she is in a position where she doesn't have to cast a vote. And personally, and I've put it out there this morning on social media, I think this was rigged. I think it's wrong. And I think there should be a recall. There should be another vote on this. There should have been a delay at the time when it happened for him to come in to vote. You can hear clearly in that clip, Jamie, can't you? Darren Miller calling for the Clwyd as they call him in Welsh, the presiding officer, to say into her, we've got a member here that can't get through. I mean, it's absolutely ludicrous. And the public angle that I've seen on social media is absolutely, I mean, this morning I looked at my Twitter feed, 300,000 plus views of that small 7-second clip of her not letting him in to vote. It's completely undemocratic, Jamie, isn't it?
Well, I think so, Richard. But I suppose if we're looking at the facts and all of this, now we've got the explanation of the presiding officer who's saying no, she's made every opportunity for that named member, say Gareth, to get in. She says she's shared his personal phone as well. Now, there's some answers that need kind of coming on this one. And you say you've kind of messaged him and got a message back this morning with regards to what's gone on. But, you know, there's other issues here. Why was this such a critical vote going on during the Tory party conference as well? Because obviously this is where he was. If there wasn't this big vote last week at the Labour Party conference, where many of the Labour member of the Senedd would have been probably down in Brighton last week. So, we've got to look at the system here. Should we be having critical votes? That this isn't just some small legislation that's going to be passed. This is going to have big ramifications from businesses across the world. We've already had kind of the nighttime industries calling for an urgent revote. Huge ramifications of this. Yeah. So, should it have been planned when the Tory party conference was on? Should the member of the Senedd been at the Tory party conference as well, as another thing? A lot of people have been working from home the last 18 months. Not being able to get on Zoom sounds very poor kind of excuse as well, but we've got to go with what they've been saying. But it's quite clear from the clip that you put on that the presiding officer was told about this issue. We know what this voting intent would have been. Obviously, the whole of the Tory votes that were cast were against the motion, as were Plaid, as were the Lib Dems. He'd made his kind of known his views on social media with regard to this. We knew all the vote was coming, and it just smacks that there's an opportunity here for Welsh politics and for Welsh Labour to say, yeah, we've looked at what's happened. Why can't they pull together another? I would imagine now, Rich, with the legislation, they have to proceed because there's been a vote. But could they now get another vote in as the nighttime industry's calling for an urgent revote? They're not going to do that probably because they know they're going to lose it, or they're not going to get it passed, or I don't even know how we will go there. That if it's a tie, because it's already passed, will the presiding officer have to vote for it? Because there's that angle as well.
Yeah, well, she's allowed to now because they said the president in standing orders. It states that. I think some of my kind of real concerns were the fact there was no national outcry on mainstream media, Jamie. I mean, this should have been headline news, a democratic vote that doesn't go through or doesn't go through the right way because of a technical glitch, irrespective of the, how it happened. That should have been hit in the frontline news press, and it never got no coverage, did it?
No, I think part of the problem is that, it's a bit of a backwater place, the Senedd. The majority of people across the UK very rarely know what's going on. But there's ample opportunity for some of this. I think, obviously, I think there's lots of coverage of this on social media from people within Wales. The Welsh journalists were tweeting about it. I watched the BBC's 10 o'clock news on this, and they went into a kind of a short item on this in the actual main bulletin. Not even one mention of the voting kind of issue that went on, which for me is a critical part of the news story. If you're reporting the news, the fact that a member of the Senedd couldn't get on, the presiding officer was told about it, and if they had got on, this kind of legislation would have been killed off at the first kind of stage here, is a critical part of the story. Not to mention it is ridiculous in my eyes with regards to this. And I think, people need to know what's gone on. We can blame the Tories for not getting the individual in to vote. We can blame the presiding officer for not delaying it. There's a lot of blame that can be put on, but I think what the public really want now, Rich, is forget blaming people. Let's fix this kind of issue that's been kind of created here. This is going to have a massive impact on business.
I was going to say that, Jamie. I was going to say this to you. This is going to have a huge societal impact, isn't it, really, on businesses and on people, because let's be honest. I'll give you an example. So let's say I've got a COVID pass on my phone. What if my phone dies? What if my phone, my battery dies all the time? I mean, my energy use on Twitter is probably to blame for most of that. But, when technical issues, what if there's a problem with your phone? What if you lose your phone? Or what if the battery dies? We have to carry papers around with us. I mean, to me, there are many other issues around the fraud aspect as well. There are many places now online where you can get fraudulent kind of passes. I know, I've seen it, and I think to myself, it's not workable, is it? So the kind of idea of doing this and the impact it'll have on business, as you mentioned, on the nightclub industry in particular. And of course, now there's talk of also about those working in the NHS. Now, people got different opinions about healthcare workers because they're working with vulnerable people. I get that. But no, the no jab, no job thing. I mean, I have real issues with that. And that's why I was at the demonstration outside this place behind me yesterday. It was making them hear the voices of the people that were there, that we were against vaccine passports, not against the vaccine, not against the vaccine. I spoke yesterday with people at that demonstration with Big Brother Watch who were double jabbed. And I said to them, why are you here? They said, well, we're against the discrimination that's being potentially passed into law in this building behind me yesterday. And I could feel their anger. And it's the same across the country. We know Scotland have done it. Now Wales have done it. Where does that leave Westminster now then, Jamie?
Well, it's in Boris's plan B, isn't it? These vaccine passports, and it's kind of the default if the NHS starts getting overrun. But the problem we got, Rich, is the NHS will get overrun because the NHS couldn't cope before the pandemic. Now, the conspiracy theorists out there might say that, maybe at the Tory party conference, the Tories want to get this passed in England as well. So actually, it's easier now. It's in Scotland and Wales. Maybe he was asked not to vote. I have no evidence to suggest that. I'm just saying that's what kind of people will be speculating with regards to this at the moment. Now, I think just for me on the vaccine passports, the problem is that it hasn't had any desired effect on the uptake of vaccine since it's been announced. It's the kind of, as you say, people have been double jabbed. I've been double jabbed. I'm against the vaccine passports. It's partly to do with the evidence base that it's quite clear that having double jab does not stop you catching COVID. It does stop you getting seriously ill, and if you're in a vulnerable category, severely reduces the risk of you dying, but it doesn't stop you catching it and it doesn't stop you passing it on. And I think it puts that false sense of security, but also, are these nightclubs going to be coping at 2 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the morning? As you say, you've got people with their phones, and just checking these things. And for me, a big part that's not discussed very often in this one is that in the GDPR Act, the Data Protection Act, medical data is seen as more sensitive than most. And we're going to be passing information off to businesses because there'll be the ones where you might show somebody at the door and they let you in or not. Yeah, there's those ones. But there'll be a number of events where you have to pre-book probably, and you have to show proof of all of this beforehand. And they'll have your medical information. It's a minefield for these businesses being able, having to hold this information as well. So I think it's inevitable things going to probably happen in England with regards to this, because we're going to get into this winter. They're going to say, oh, look, they're in Scotland, in Wales. The important thing is going to be what impact it has potentially on the COVID virus. But in the last week, Rich, in Wales, COVID rates have started coming down again. Now, I suppose it's a good thing that they've come down before the introduction of the vaccine.
Jim, can you give us some, because I know that you report the facts and the data, and for anybody watching, you need to follow Jamie on social media. I'll mention his stuff at the bottom of the video because that's one thing about you. I have to say, you're brilliant on the facts and the figures. And I've always say, if you want to know what's going on in Wales, take a look at Jamie's stats. That's what's going on. Can you give us an idea of what is happening? Because as you mentioned, the vaccine passport introduction is not going to help with the take-up of the vaccine. There's no evidential basis for it, being beneficial in any way. What are the figures telling us at the minute, Jamie?
Yeah, so I've been tracking kind of the vaccine uptake, and generally, we've got over 96% of the elderly people who have double vaccinated. It falls dramatically as you get to younger people. It's about 70% when you get to the younger age groups. But the uptake since the introduction, or when the announcement was made by Mark Drakeford for these, hasn't really moved much for the younger age groups. And it's what you'd expect in society, that the vaccine uptake gets lower as people's personal risk gets kind of lower as well. It's not a thing. In particular on the virus, so we've seen a huge surge in the last few weeks, and then it peaked. We actually had the highest case rate in Wales about a week and a half ago throughout the whole of the pandemic. But this in part, Rich, is to do with the fact that testing significantly more people now, in particular school children, than we have in the past. So we're finding more cases. But last week, cases have started coming down. Patients in hospital, more importantly, has been coming down. One of the critical things which people can find out on my Twitter thing, and we get it every week, is that we are seeing significant people catching the virus in hospital again. That's probably an area where you get bigger margins of wins in terms of reducing deaths when you fix that rather than vaccine passports. But the good news is cases have started coming down now. And remember, we haven't had any major intervention. And it could just well be that we've seen it in Scotland. Maybe the virus is kind of reaching that peak where it's going to start coming back down again. And I think the good news is that it's come down before the introduction of the vaccine passports, because I suppose some people would have said, oh, look, we've introduced vaccine passports and cases have come down. Yeah. So having that happen beforehand helps to kind of distinguish between cause and association, I think.
Jamie, listen, our time's up. It's always a pleasure to have you on and to discuss, the current issues we're facing right now. And folks can follow you. What's your Twitter handle, Jamie, so we can let folks know?
Yeah, nice and easy one. Stats, so STATS, so stats, and then Jamie, so it's at stats Jamie. You can find me over there.
Brilliant. Jamie, thank you. So I know you're busy today. You've got a couple of other interviews with other media outlets as well. I really appreciate it. And folks, just to say to you all that this is not the end, because I'm speaking this morning to a couple of people in London who are a legal team actually, and we're going to be discussing whether there's potential for any grounds of doing something with the vote rigging, as I call it, yesterday, or steal the vote, or Senedd steal, hashtag that, get it going. But Jamie, thank you for tuning in and being with us. I should say, not you tuning in, but joining us. And I'll catch you all here on Rich Politics next week. Bye for now.